Hello, everybody.
Hello,
I am Theo Black,
I'm Sarah Black.
and I slept a little funny, but I think I'm better than last time when I was an actual zombie. Um,
I'd forgotten about that.
yeah, no, I'm part of the living again, not the living dead, but
Yeah.
um,
Hey,
so yes,
so you get to take. I stopped paying attention. What was the plot of Land of the Dead?
okay. I feel like I'm Rich Evans, and Mike has just handed me a VHS to try and. Except Rich
Uh,
Evans kind of does a good job of it ultimately.
yeah, so we're continuing in our
Night of the Living Dead franchise.
exploration for October, and we watched Land of the Dead, and I really checked out at some point. So you
So,
get to talk about the plot.
so a little bit of preamble to this. Land of the Dead is available to stream somewhere. I forget where it is. Or did we have to? I think we had to rent this one. But
Yeah, it's streaming. You pay for it. That's all.
yeah, it's rentable somewhere. I keep remembering now that we're actually like in sync. Like this is going to go out probably like tomorrow or this week.
Right.
We should actually tell people where we've streamed this in case
Right.
somebody watches us. Um, and so so there's the original trilogy which we've done already of Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the
Dawn.
Dead, and Day of the Dead. And then there's a 20-year gap, exactly 20 years, and Land of the Dead comes out in the digital age, and it looks very digital.
It is
And
his highest budget he has, I think, to date, they said. So even the ones that come after, he didn't have as much money for them.
yeah, and so so this plot is as follows. Simon Baker, who's the actor and the name is Riley Denbo, is a zombie hunter. Like he goes out with people to get supplies for a section of Philadelphia. Is it Philadelphia?
No.
It's where is it? It's Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
That's where these all are because that's Romero's
Got it.
hometown or where he
Right,
lived or
right.
something.
So so Simon Baker is the head of this group that goes out and gets supplies from the rest of the world and brings it back to this small island-ish area. It's not an island. It's got a river on two sides and then a wall. And he brings supplies back for it. And that is the setup of the movie. And then the plot of the movie is that there's a zombie uprising from outside of Pittsburgh that is coming to Pittsburgh at the same time that John Leguizamo, who is Cholo, which man, oh man, there is some questionable shit in this movie. So Cholo Demora, and he is been doing stuff for the guy who runs it, who's modernist evil Dennis Hopper, who's always evil.
Right, because his where he lives is modernist, and
yeah. Anyways,
that signifies evil in most Los Angeles films.
But John Leguizamo, who works for Riley Simon Baker, has also been doing things for evil head of Pittsburgh, which is Dennis Hopper, and that's all falling apart at the same time that there's a zombie uprising, and then everything goes to shit as both things sort of coincide and happen.
Right.
That's my best attempt at doing the plot. I actually think I did okay there.
There's a big truck called Dead Reckoning. That's the only other thing.
That is the best. That might be the best part of the movie is Dead Reckoning. The thing is, I've actually seen video games and other things that like have done a version of that, and I don't know that like Dead Reckoning is the first instance of it or anything, but Dead Reckoning is definitely a very cool instance of said truck. It's like they spent all their money on that prop almost. Is what happened.
Right.
All right, so do you want me to start talking about it because I might have something to say, or do you want to talk about why you kind of checked out?
I don't know where to start with this one on some level, so I don't know. You tell me who starts. So immediately we are plunged into the fact that everyone is just some guy for the most part. Now John Leguizamo is Cholo, which means he's ethnically like Central or South American in some way. I mean, Cholo, I think, is usually Mexican American, but
yeah. Well, and also we talked about this. We're from Los Angeles, so like Cholo is a term that isn't something we can talk a lot about because we're white people and we don't know all these things. But cholo is usually like, I don't know. There's usually like a specific clothing style and like a specific, like almost like a specific era of like
So
Mexican American culture. So it was like,
it was a little strange. So anyway, so we don't know what we're talking about when it comes to that. But other than that, it's like Simon Baker, some other white guy, Like
we were joking a lot about human male.
Yeah, there's a lot of human males in this. And I'm almost want to talk about that more when we get to Diary of the Dead, but it's furthermore, their characters are pretty weak. Simon Baker seems kind of surprised when a friend gets bitten and they have to kill him right away, which you would think would be something they'd come up against. Like,
yeah, we're well into the apocalypse at this point,
often,
so this should be. Yeah.
I thought the mechanic zombie who was black, which seems to be where like our, for the last 3 we've had a main character who's black, and now that character is the mechanic zombie.
We've like regressed almost. Like the first one, our main lead is black, Dwayne Jones, and the second one, Dawn of the Dead, he's like a co-lead. Like they're really all leads. He's not as strongly the lead necessarily in a Ken Foree.
Yeah.
And then I forget the name of the actor in the last one, but he's like not the lead anymore, but he is a part of the group. And now
he's a zombie.
He's a zombie, although he is probably my favorite character.
He's like our new Bubs.
He's really, he's our new Bubs. He's one of the only characters with character.
Yeah. So that's a problem. And I was thinking about it because the first thing you really have is the gunfight. They go in to get, we're feeling really video game-ish now, only now video games actually exist, because the last film was from 85, and it was interesting how much these earlier movies felt like video games, but video games were either non-existent or like very, like in 85, I think you have Nintendo and stuff, but there's nothing that realistic. But I'm sure by 2005 we've got, I didn't look it up, but we've definitely got like zombie video games and
I mean that's
so on. So now,
at least era. But.
So it felt like a video game. There was a moment of interest for me as they kind of commented, and it made me think of Warm Bodies, because they were kind of like, the zombie behavior is changing.
Yeah.
It didn't really go too far except for the zombie uprising thing, but it was so uneven, like so much of this. So for a moment I was kind of interested, but anyway, I was trying to compare this to like the opening of Dawn of the Dead, which is just like a big gunfight too.
Yeah.
But it kind of had like characters were becoming friends. There was this interesting overtones because they were going into a predominantly Black and Latino apartment building where people were refusing to leave when they were supposed to. There was like kind of interesting stuff going on. Whereas with this, it was like, they're going to go get supplies. Everybody already knows everybody. I don't know what really changed in the story. Like, it didn't seem to catalyze anything. It was just like, we need an opening firefight scene. And that's what we got, along with Simon Baker being startled that you couldn't save someone who'd been bit, which didn't make any sense to me. It
sets up the fireworks. Like, it sets up the mechanics of the universe.
Right, which is like a video game almost.
Yeah. Like,
kind of a thing. Like, you can use fireworks to distract the zombies while you go in and so on.
Yeah.
So that wasn't great. And I don't know. I have a bigger critique to make. I don't know if I should let you talk a little bit first, and then I'll go into my big thing.
So the movie suffers, in my opinion, from like kind of like the big flaw for you and me. Not everybody's gonna have this thing but like most, like, really, storytelling is a very important part of movies. There are experimental movies. There's like movies that are really heavy on the action and have less story, but like, it's rare that you'll find someone who cares not about story, not at all. So Land of the Dead sort of suffers from like being an event movie, like where it's basically an event is happening. And that's not a problem, because there's plenty of movies that are like an event is happening. Like the first Night of Living Dead is basically kind of like an event movie where something is happening, and that's kind of what the main thing is. But there's a story and there's character arcs, even in Night of Living Dead. like not a
Mhm.
ton. Like
Right.
it's but like Land of the Dead's like there's like some preamble, and then we have the event of like everything going to shit. And
Mhm.
there's what I don't know, what does Riley, Simon Baker's character, really learn through all of it? What does John Leguizamo's character Cholo really learn? I don't know. We don't. There's not really character arcs. There's not really much of a plot. I mean, I guess there is a plot, but the story is just like, hey,
Well,
look, society was bad before, and society is bad now. So like, I'm left with like, there really isn't. There's not a lot of character. There's barely any character arcs except for our zombie, which is why he's my favorite character.
John Leguizamo's character does have a bit of a
Well,
character arc.
that's
I think they
yeah.
give some really, and also Riley learns that you do have to kill zombies, except maybe not, or that you do have to kill your friend. It's like it's very murky. It's
Yeah,
very
if I guess you're right, but like I didn't even really think about it until you just said it, because like John Leguizamo's character arc is like he's a dick, and then he decides to like do something good as his last act. But even that's, I honestly, even that I kind of shrug at, because it's like he's still just kind of a dick.
yeah.
So it's like I don't. So it's like
Yeah.
so the character arcs, and so the story isn't really like the story isn't really going anywhere, and there's no like, hey, here's a surprise, like. And it's not like there's no character. Like we have our guy who was horribly burned in a fire, and he's got kind of a backstory. And Simon Baker's character. Oh, spoilers! Reminder: spoilers for this.
Oh, we've already spoiled the heck out of this, but sure.
Yeah. And so this Simon Baker eventually reveals that like his brother died, but like he puts that as like something bad that happened to him. And so there's kind of like you can like get there's like pieces dotting this, but like that's not enough. Like all of that. Like, and here's my big thought on this is like, weirdly, Day of the Dead to me is less interesting as a concept, but is better as a movie than Land of the Dead.
Mhm.
Like, Land of the Dead is a more interesting concept to me because A, there's some intentionality to what George Romero is doing at this point, or at least it seems like he's trying to say, like, hey, look, humans are evil everywhere. It's not the zombies, it's the humans you should be afraid of, or whatever. And
Yeah.
like they've reformed a corporate structure, and there's the poor and the wealthy, and there's all that. And like that is an interesting idea. And it's not necessarily original, but it is slightly more interesting to me because you don't see it necessarily as much because mainstream movies that are being financed by people aren't necessarily going to tackle that. It's, I don't know, maybe I just am more interested in that concept than Day of the Dead military versus scientist civilian. But like, so like Land of the Dead could be a more interesting movie than Day of the Dead if it executed well on things, except that the action isn't very good, the cinematography isn't very good. I already talked about how the story isn't very good. And at the end of the day, I'm kind of just left with like, well, I paid attention because it was in front of me and because my girlfriend kind of liked it in places. And yeah, I don't know.
Okay, so you've given me a perfect launch point because I actually think the concept of this movie is fundamentally flawed. And I'm going to go to what my boyfriend said. So I made fun of him and have made fun of him for years. And I think I have to take a step back and admit he was right, because there is a scene in this movie where they're in some kind of like raw, things are awful, like place where people are just going to the basest of human suffering for pleasure. And Asia Argento gets thrown into a cage with some zombies until Simon Baker rescues her and da-da-da. And my boyfriend looks at me and he says, it's weird that they're still using money. And I said, that's not what's weird. But now that I've really seen the film and me and him have talked about it, it is weird that they're using money. Why is there an economic system in this movie? Because George Romero wants to make a comment on wealth inequality. And I saw that critics, including Ebert, were like, this is very like interesting. And it's like, it's not, it's really not. The wealthy people live in a big tower and the poor people live below. That's not interesting. That's not new. That's not different. That's something that maybe an older, out of touch man who is probably doing financially fine thinks is really interesting, but it's not. Why does money matter in this world at all? Like, what financial industry is running this world? I mean, maybe you, if that's what you want to do, then you need to do it, because it doesn't actually, like, why does, remember in Dawn of the Dead, Dawn of the Dead negates Land of the Dead because they go to a bank and they open it up and they pull this money out and they're like, who knows? Maybe it'll be useful again in the future, but it's not useful now. And that's the truth. And so for that reason, I find Land of the Dead like just kind of bluntly dumb about it. And I get what he's trying to do. But again, it you know, and I'm making some suppositions. I'm making some guesses as to, you know, where Romero's head might have been and so on. And I would be interested to talk to him. And he's dead.
Yeah, where he's still alive.
About, you know, what he really was trying to do there, because it just feels, you know, Hollywood has this habit of taking issues and being like, you know, it's like Green Book type situations where it's like, you know, it's bad that, you know, income inequality exists. And it's like, most of you guys are rich. So what are you talking about? Like what on earth is happening here? And it feels like that kind of a situation.
Yeah.
So for that reason, like, he had these 3 movies where I don't think he was thinking about making a big societal point. And I think that in itself created a societal point. And then he has this one where he's like, it's wrong how the rich do well. And it's like, didn't need you to tell me that. Like,
yeah, I think I definitely understand what you're saying. Like, I think you're completely right. Now that you've made that point, that makes total sense. I think a part of what like still would be, again, like this is poorly executed. Like a part of what would be like interesting to me is like some of the even Dead Reckoning is kind of interesting. Like we now have like what if, you know, you finally were able to fight back against the zombies to some degree. Like the zombies, you know, eventually the zombies, you know, everybody is just dead in an area, and so you can start shooting them, and there's not infinite zombies despite what these movies have. So like that could almost be interesting. And like the whole, you know, society has like, you know, we're years into a zombie apocalypse and there's a society that has formed. Like that could be interesting. So like, yeah, the way they do it is blunt and dumb, but like I think like you see kind of what I'm getting at. Like there could be something interesting here if it wasn't so blunt and dumb.
Right. No.
And like I think it was you that said like apparently Guillermo del Toro likes this movie.
Yes. Which doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, which everybody loves Guillermo del Toro, and I like his movies. I don't like The Shape of Water, but I like some of his other movies, and there's a few I haven't seen. I just don't quite go for him as much as everybody else. I'm glad he got his Oscar. Like I am genuinely glad about that. For like,
I think he sometimes goes 12 on things that you don't need to go 12 on because you're like, I got it.
He's that
you
rare film.
You see Crimson Peak. That's the one.
He to me, he's a filmmaker who's kind of more about like design, and like he's almost more of like a visual art filmmaker. Like he's that weird place where we meet where like some like Marvel movies are usually not that complex. They have pretty standard storytelling structure. Guillermo del Toro's movies like look really neat and have really neat cinematography and often music and good acting and are really well made, but the story is kind of like at the bottom of the list.
Well, yes, it feels
not like I'm not saying it's bad, but like
I was talking about this with Mr. Why Is There Currency here, who turns out to be right about the whole thing, where it's like it feels like Guillermo del Toro, and again, totally making things up. And he seems like a lovely man, you know.
Oh yeah, I would love to know him, but
a teddy bear of a man. But it seems like it's like he goes, wouldn't it be cool if this happened? And wouldn't it be cool if that happened? And wouldn't it be cool if that happened? And it's like, then you need a reason for those things.
Then he takes some string and kind of puts it together.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm going to wrap this around to Land of the Dead because, like, this movie is kind of that. Like,
wouldn't
there's
it be
these
cool
interesting
if there
moments.
was this big armored car and then they drove it? Wouldn't it be cool if, you know, this lady gets thrown into a cage with zombies? Like,
yeah, and it's like, it's just a kind of like those moments are interesting. Like the car is interesting, the cage fighting is interesting. Dennis Hopper's modernist thing, that's been done, so that's not as interesting. But the society thing is interesting. There's the poor, and we've got the medicine being given to this poor man by our guy Simon Baker. And Simon Baker just what is interesting is Simon Baker wants to leave this society.
Yeah,
like that could be interesting.
Yeah,
that could be an integral
it's interesting
part
that
of a movie.
It's interesting that he's pulled out as much as he can, because like we start in a farmhouse, we go to a mall, we go to a military place, which isn't that much more pulled out. And now he's like pulled out all the way.
Yeah.
But it just feels like at that point, you're like, in a way, the first three films really are zombie movies. And this is almost like an apocalypse plus zombie movie.
Yeah.
I mean, there are apocalyptic elements to the others, but they're not society level. And this is like society level. And I actually had this thought during Diary of the Dead, but I think it applies more to this movie in a way. We are experiencing a strange world altering experience right now with the pandemic.
Right.
And what happened was everything changed really quickly for a few weeks, and then things got normal and boring. And that seems to be a more likely reality than most of what you see in these kind of movies. Yeah. And that would have been.
We should clarify normal and boring for people who are not directly affected by the pandemic.
Right. Sorry. No. I mean, people are being adversely affected. People are dying, and that's horrible. But on a personal level, you've got, people who are,
I work in an office.
People who are trying to go back to life as normal. You've got people who are still indoors, who aren't leaving at all. You've got kind of everything in between, but you don't have like
new societies forming.
You don't have like, things are changing for sure, but it's not like the way you see it in this film. And it just seems so
like maybe
it feels like he's trying to do too much in this film, and as a result it's scattered. There's the weird thing where now the Irish are poor again, which is a strange, that goes with Cholo, where you're like, what is going on
here? Like that's, I think he's trying to say something, but it's very like, here's some hams and fists.
Yeah, and I appreciate the way he's pulled out, but it's a little too, and it doesn't, and during a pandemic, it feels kind of like
in our own lives, like it's more like I'd be curious, like you make an interesting point there, because for you and me, like I'm an office worker, your job was was on the way out and all that, so we're kind of, and I was mostly at home through all of this, so it's kind of like and we don't know anybody personally to have passed from COVID or COVID related illnesses.
No, we don't. We have some distant relatives, and then we have a friend who had it.
Yes, and so like hasn't like touched us. So like I'm curious, like with somebody who works at like in a grocery store, or like somebody in the medical field, like there has to, like, I'm wondering how that would almost like that read like, but like
that would be interesting. That would have been more interesting. Have a grocery store employee be your main character. Like that's, people are still trying to,
Land of the Dead could almost be that, and it's like that would have been the way to do it, I think, like, is to make it that way, but they didn't, so I don't know. Anyways, Land of the Dead is boring.
That's almost, I would have been, part of me feels like, what would the 90s Dead film have been? And then part of me feels like this is the 90s Dead film, because it is just kind of.
It kind of is. It was not intentional, but I think.
I mean, I know there's a kind of horror fan, the kind that likes the Resident Evil films, the kind that likes a certain kind of action horror, that would like this movie. That's not me, so.
Yeah. I can kind of see why some people would like this, but it's not one that I'm into myself.
Yeah.